1. All right, friends, welcome back. Today we have our friend Stacey Young with us. Stacy is the founder and executive director of an organization called Justice Connection, which is doing remarkable and unfortunately really necessary work given what's going on at the Department of Justice. Let me tell you a little bit about Stacey's background. She is an 18-year Department of Justice veteran who worked at the department until January 24th, 2025. She served as a senior attorney in the Civil Rights Division. She went on to serve, in the Civil Division, and then went on to serve in the Civil Rights Division, working under 5 presidential administrations and 7 attorneys general. So, Stacy, first of all, thank you for your body of work on behalf of the American people at the Department of Justice. And now, tell our viewers what Justice Connection is all about, what its first year looked like since you created it, and looking ahead to year 2, what do you expect?
Thanks, Glenn. So year 2 was a hell of a year. It felt somehow like the longest and shortest year of my life. I founded the organization just days after the inauguration, 1 week after I resigned from the department. And I founded the organization because I knew that Department of Justice employees were going to be under attack from this administration. And I knew that because incoming administration officials had promised that they would attack federal employees, particularly those at DOJ. And, I knew that the reason they would be particularly interested in DOJ is because there's only one agency that investigated and prosecuted this president. And this president made his retributive intentions very clear. So we figured out very early on what kind of support DOJ employees would need if they were going to continue to stay at the department to hold the line. And we began providing it. So we stood up a pro bono legal support network where we now have hundreds of DOJ alumni lawyers who are representing DOJ employees for free when they're fired or when they're under investigation or when they need ethics advice. We have a mental health support network where we have dozens of clinicians who are ready to provide counseling to DOJ employees who are in trauma. And this administration indeed promised to put them in trauma. That's a direct quote. We have an employment support network to help DOJ employees find new jobs if they're chased out of the department. We've recently expanded that. We provide recent DOJ employees with free media training to encourage them to speak out about what's happening. And in addition to the direct support we provide to DOJ workforce, we speak out ourselves and we empower DOJ alumni to speak out as well. In just a year, we have been featured in almost 200 national media stories. We have a DOJ tracker, the only one of its kind, where we record all of the damage that this administration has done to DOJ. We put out videos with alumni to get the word out. We have Substack, which I encourage everybody to follow, where DOJ alumni talk about their former work and explain what the attacks on their former offices mean for all Americans. We've had advocacy campaigns. We've put out letters, public letters from thousands of DOJ alumni, and those letters have generated tons of national attention. We're doing an incredible amount every day with thousands of DOJ alumni to make sure that the people who understand DOJ best are out there explaining to the public why attacks on the institution are so dangerous. So in the year ahead, we are expanding our work. One of the things we're going to be launching soon is an FBI support network, because people in the FBI have been under extreme duress because of FBI leadership, and they need our help more than ever. So we have already strengthened our legal network, so our volunteers know how to represent FBI agents and analysts when they are targeted. And we are going to be providing a whole lot more support to the roughly 35,000 members of the FBI who are doing their best to keep our country safe and our nation secure under incredibly difficult circumstances. We're also going to begin leveraging our alumni network to start thinking about rebuilding the department, because it's going to take a lot more time to rebuild the department than it has to tear much of it down. And we believe that former career employees, the employees who were at the department across administrations and who really understood what worked and what didn't, should absolutely have a central seat at the table when we're talking about rebuilding it down the line. So we have a lot we're planning for the next year, and we're taking a little bit of time to really kind of celebrate what we were able to do in the first year, and we are not planning on slowing down at all.
And before we dig into some of the issues of the day, which I think dovetail with what Justice Connection is trying to do, I want to ask you now, and I'm going to ask you again later, where can people find you? How can people support you? What kind of assistance do you need?
Yeah. If you are a DOJ alum and you're not already in our alumni network, please reach out to us. You can email us at alumni@thejusticeconnection.org. But everybody, regardless of whether you've ever worked for the Justice Department, the Justice Department affects all of our lives in incredibly important ways. DOJ keeps our community safe. It prevents terrorism. It protects our fundamental rights. Everybody has an interest in making sure that the rule of law is upheld and that DOJ exists with as much integrity as possible to enforce the rule of law. So we encourage everybody to support DOJ employees in your community, and they're in everybody's community. We encourage people to write and call your members of Congress to encourage them to exercise far more oversight over attacks on DOJ than it is right now. And, we encourage everybody, if you're able, to donate to efforts like Justice Connection that are supporting DOJ employees. And if you are inclined to donate to us, we would greatly appreciate it. You can visit thejusticeconnection.org. And we're really only able to do this work because of support from American citizens who understand why what we're doing is so important.
And we're living in this insane dystopian time when the people who dedicated their careers to doing the work of the American people, the public, providing that the community is safe, providing the rights of the victims are vindicated, protecting everybody's civil rights, protecting the environment. DOJ does so much. And for those people to be under attack, I will never forget or forgive that quote. I believe it was from Russell Vogt. Please correct me if I'm wrong, that we're going to put the federal workers in trauma. What the hell kind of government or aspiring government official talks like that? But you know what? They put their money where their dirty mouths are. And so one of the questions I have is, do you have any sense of how many former DOJ employees are involved in challenging their wrongful terminations? We hear about more and more and more every day. And I know Justice Connection doesn't represent all of them. There are a lot of attorneys out there doing this good work. But do you have any sense of how many people have been wrongfully terminated? How many of them are seeking to fight those wrongful terminations in the courts?
So one of the things we're carefully tracking are departures from DOJ, including terminations. And more than 240 DOJ career employees have been terminated. And when they're terminated, they're almost never given a reason for their termination. We believe that in almost all cases, it's because this administration didn't like the cases they worked on, whether those were January 6th prosecutions, whether those were Jack Smith prosecutions, other types of work that this administration opposes or finds distasteful. So among the over 240, most of them have challenged their terminations in court. And most of them go to an administrative body called the Merit Systems Protection Board. That board, as you can imagine, because over 300,000 federal employees have left their jobs in the last year, is completely overwhelmed. So it's taking a long time for those cases to funnel through the legal system. but most employees at DOJ have brought legal challenges, and many of those employees have come to Justice Connection because they needed legal help, and they otherwise may not have lawyers who are qualified to take these cases or afford their lawyers, because it's extremely expensive to pay for a lawyer in the best of times, but especially when you've just lost your job. We have been able to connect many of those people to free lawyers and extremely competent lawyers. And we are helping to make it possible for people to find jobs after this administration has broken the law by firing them.
And do you have any sense, Stacy, as to how the people who remain at the Department of Justice are weathering this storm? Are they keeping their heads down and trying to do the hard work of the American people, hoping somebody won't frog march them out of DOJ with no explanation?
Some people are keeping their heads down. Some are loudly pushing back on orders they're receiving that may be illegal or unethical or unconstitutional. It's a very large institution, and employees throughout the department are experiencing different things. People are having on different ways. As you know, the department has more than 100,000 employees. Many of those employees have already been targeted. Many believe they probably will be targeted soon. So we are trying to provide them with the support, with the resources, with the tools to endure that targeting, to push back if they are so inclined to do so, to blow the whistle when they believe that's important, to basically proceed in whatever way they think is most responsible. But, we thought from the very beginning that it's fair to leave employees at DOJ on their own to endure these attacks. These are public servants who dedicated their lives to protecting our country, to serving our country. And we believe that they deserve support from an outside organization that they trust. And because we were all there ourselves, they trust us.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the fallout from the Renee Good homicide, from the Alex Preddy homicide, and also from the search warrant that was executed on the Fulton County, Georgia election offices, which is another special kind of insanity from this old prosecutor's perspective. But I know some of the fallout is there have been federal prosecutors who have stood up and said, we will not be part of this. And they left. There have been FBI agents who I think have either left or been pushed out of their job for having the temerity to voice their concern about what may very well be a lawless operation being pursued by FBI, by DOJ. But let me take you first to your civil rights days, because when I see the officer involved fatal shooting of Renee Good, and I do not have the expertise in civil rights investigations that you have, but for 24 years at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, specifically when I was the chief of homicide, when our civil rights section investigated officer involved shootings resulting in death, they would sometimes pull me in as part of the team because I was the homicide guy. I had the relationship with the OCME, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in DC. I knew all the deputy medical examiners. I was intimately familiar with not just autopsy reports, but how they can be used in connection with investigations and prosecutions. I always told my prosecutors there's a whole lot more there on the evidentiary front than just cause and manner of death, as you well know. So I would sometimes get pulled into those investigations to assess the homicide piece. But when I saw that what this Department of Justice decided to do in the aftermath of Jonathan Ross shooting and killing Renee Good is to launch an investigation into Renee Good's spouse, I can tell everybody one thing we never did when we had a new homicide case come into my section is launch an investigation into the victim's family members, unless they happen to be the perpetrator. I mean, this is such a perversion of the law enforcement function. And I know it resulted in people, I think prosecutors in Minnesota saying, we will take no part in this. What is your view of what's going on in both Renee Good, and then we can talk about Alex Preddy in a minute too on the civil rights front.
It's an appalling abdication of duty. We all saw the videos. We all saw what happened. There's an office in the Civil Rights Division that addresses these kinds of incidents when there is a law enforcement shooting or other apparent use of excessive force. And especially in this, so what this office does is it generally sends prosecutors to the city where an incident like this happens, uh, and it begins investigating. And it especially, these prosecutors especially go if the incident is extremely high profile, like these are. I suggest anybody check out 60 Minutes from last night, where Sam Truppel, who my former coworker in the Civil Rights Division, talked about what the Civil Rights Division usually does in these kinds of situations. They investigate because law enforcement officials using excessive force is unconstitutional and it's illegal. And when it happens, DOJ has a duty to investigate, to see whether there is a reason to prosecute. That didn't happen. The department made public immediately after the Renee Good killing, saying, demonizing Renee Good and her spouse and saying there's no reason to open a civil rights investigation into what happened. That's preposterous. You don't need to be a civil rights lawyer to know that what happened very well could have been a serious civil rights violation. DOJ should have been on the ground the next day, and it should have begun a serious investigation. And the fact that it didn't sends a very dangerous message to law enforcement officials across the country that they can act with impunity. If DOJ doesn't do its job after things like this happen, then we are all less safe.
And then, of course, that was followed up rather quickly by another officer involved, use of force resulting in death. I call it an execution. Again, that's from my perspective as a homicide prosecutor for 22 of my 30 years. That was an execution, which is not really a legal term as much as murder and manslaughter are legal terms. But we see with our own eyes, they engage first in excessive force by, without any just cause, throwing a woman to the ground. Alex Preddy goes to render aid. They essentially jump on his back, force him onto the ground, disarm him, and execute him. And I am awaiting autopsy results. We've heard a little bit about it, but and then originally there was going to be no investigation. Then I think they tried to pull a fast one and say HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, was going to investigate their own. You should never, investigate a member of your own unit or component. And HSI, my understanding, has no experience or expertise in investigating excessive force allegations. Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we've heard that under the leadership, air quotes, of Harmeet Dillon at the Civil Rights Division, there's going to be a civil rights investigation. Do I have that right, or did I get something wrong there?
That's all correct. Todd Blanche announced at the Epstein press conference the other day that there would be an investigation by the Civil Rights Division. We'll see how that proceeds. The fact that the federal government, including officials at DOJ, were telling flagrant, appalling lies immediately after both of these shootings happened really calls into question whether a fair investigation, a thorough investigation can happen at this point. I was glad to see that apparently there will be an investigation into the Preddy shooting. Another problem with what's happening in Minneapolis, is that DOJ has been pushing local and state law enforcement out of the way. DOJ has a very long history of working cooperatively with state and local law enforcement. It's imperative that DOJ do that to maintain trust among Americans, to ensure that investigations by not just the federal government, but state and local law enforcement agencies can happen unimpeded. There is no reason to be boxing out state and local law enforcement unless I think there's something to hide. This kind of tension that DOJ is needlessly creating is very dangerous. And I see no sign of it stopping. And I'll also mention that there was a really important office in DOJ called the Community Relations Service that for more than 60 years had gone into communities when community tensions were bubbling so that they could try to ease them, so that they could try to prevent violence. In fact, this office went into Minneapolis after the George Floyd murder and really was effective at diffusing a lot of the tension in that city. It's done incredible work across the country for many, many years. And this administration destroyed it. This administration purged almost the entire office, and that office is now not functional. So right now, when America needs that office more than ever, it's not there to do its work. And instead, the tensions in Minneapolis between protesters and federal law enforcement are bubbling up. I fear that we're going to see this happen in city after city after city. And, so much, if not all of the blame lies with the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security for creating these tensions, for not following protocol, for eliminating important jobs that, were important in preventing these things from happening and properly addressing them after they do. So, the unforced errors we're seeing are many, and they're not slowing down.
And then finally, there is some more fallout. I think FBI, maybe it was a special agent in charge who was either terminated or left in the aftermath of the search warrant that was executed on the Fulton County election office. 700 boxes of ballots seized. And again, my mind goes to what in the world was in that affidavit in support of that search warrant. After there was a vote count, a vote recount, a vote audit, countless court cases that rejected the notion of massive fraud in Fulton County. How, I don't know how they convinced a federal judge that there was probable cause. Hopefully that will be unsealed at some point. Tulsi Gabbard, as DNI, is on the ground at the execution of an FBI search warrant. None of this makes any sense. And again, as a result, I think there was at least one FBI special agent in charge forced out for having the nerve to stand up for what's right, basically. And I know Justice Connection is, I'm sure, standing ready to assist the prosecutors who are either being forced out or self-selecting because they can't endure or endorse what's going on in Minnesota, what's going on down in Fulton County, Georgia. But what are your thoughts? Because it is such an intense curiosity, to put it mildly, what just went on in Fulton County.
It's hard to understand what the federal government is doing right now. My fear, a lot of people's fear, is that this may have something to do with the possibility for election interference in some way. The fact that Tulsi Gabbard is directly involved, the fact that she was at the raid, and there was just reporting that issued by the New York Times that she met directly with FBI agents in Atlanta, that is extremely out of the ordinary. And the heads of the FBI offices, the FBI field offices in Atlanta and Minneapolis, seem to have been pushed out. Because it seems like they did not go along with this administration's agenda. That has extremely serious repercussions for those offices' ability to do their work. When you remove the leader of an office and you remove that person unjustly and involuntarily, that destabilizes the rest of the office. In addition to removing important institutional knowledge, it leaves the rest of the members of those offices, in some cases, rudderless. Not only did we see purges of people from the FBI in these cases, but 6 prosecutors from Minneapolis resigned, seemingly because the Minneapolis U.S. Attorney's Office was directed by Maine Justice to, as you said earlier, investigate Renee Good's wife instead of investigating the agent who shot her. And Pam Bondi, this didn't get much reporting, but after the 6 tendered their resignation, Pam Bondi went ahead and fired 5 of them. And she said she did that so they wouldn't use their annual leave, which is absurd because they're still going to get paid for their annual leave. And then she gave them a reason to sue the Department of Justice. And they're probably going to win, which is going to cost the taxpayers an enormous amount of money. So you're seeing, extremely experienced leaders of important offices throughout DOJ. The 6 prosecutors who left Minnesota were the heads of that office. You're seeing offices being stripped of their leadership. You're seeing morale plummet in these offices. You're seeing public servants having to make the most unimaginable decisions about whether to resign when these things happen or get fired. So much of this is just lawless. It's stupid, it's dangerous, and it's going to harm all Americans.
And one thing that I hold fast to, we're always looking for points of light or a little bit of a silver lining behind the big dark orange cloud that we're all living under, is I don't think there's a chance in hell they can fire their way through all ethical DOJ employees or lawyers. They can't do it because we know those people. Those are our friends. Those are our colleagues. And I would expect more resignations, probably, unfortunately, more unlawful terminations because people stand up against the ethical corruption, the lapses of this administration. I used to be an Army JAG prosecutor starting in the 80s, and I don't believe they can fire their way through the ethical military JAG officers either. They're trying, and they're trying at the Department of Justice as well. But I don't think this is sustainable. We saw a tweet from, I forget which Trump flunky it was, saying, "Hey, DM me if you want to be a DOJ prosecutor." Come on, are you kidding me? I don't think they can fire their way through ethical DOJ employees and hire enough flunkies to continue to do the people's work. So I believe that this is not sustainable, and this will implode at some point. I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't know how much damage they're going to be able to do to DOJ and to the American people before it implodes. But it's like a Ponzi scheme that they're trying to put together enough unethical people to keep the government running. I don't believe they can do it.
I agree. They came into office not understanding that the career workforce at DOJ is the department's backbone, and that the department can't do its work without the career employees who stay there across administrations. They thought it was a great idea to try to purge as many as they could. They're starting to realize that they were wrong, and they are going to realize this as more and more and more as this continues. And you really can't underestimate the bravery and just the incredible sacrifices DOJ career employees are making right now to stay there and to endure the attacks, to, brush off the deep state accusations and the lies, to try to hold the line, to try to enforce the law in a fair and fearless way. These employees are going through hell, but they are enduring it. If they have to leave, they will. We've already seen that, but most of them are trying to stay to make sure that you have good, ethical, experienced professionals at the department carrying out its mission critical work.
And let me finish with this. People should know that Department of Justice employees, lawyers in particular, are not getting rich. They're making a government salary. I can't tell you how many of my friends, and I don't criticize them for this except to their face over a beer, would leave the Department of Justice after 4 years and go out and quadruple their salary overnight in private practice. But we stayed because it wasn't about the money. It was about the mission. It was about the sacred duty of representing the American people, which gave me more job satisfaction than all the money in the world. That's why I stayed for 30 years. So lest anybody think that DOJ attorneys are getting rich. No, they are struggling mightily, as you just uh, suggested, Stacy, and they're doing it on a government salary, and which I think makes it all the more courageous and admirable and honorable. And I'm so glad Justice Connection is there for those people. So again, tell everybody how they can find you, how they can help the cause.
Absolutely. So you can find us online at thejusticeconnection.org. If you can, we encourage people to donate. It really, every donation really makes a difference. We are a very small organization trying to do this work on a very small budget. Um, and follow us on Substack. We are putting out some amazing content by past DOJ employees, really diving deep into what these issues mean, into what the assault on the department means for everyday Americans. We, we are punching above our weight, and support from concerned Americans out there make what we're doing possible. So check us out online, follow our work, and we look forward to. I look forward to seeing you again on your show, Glenn. I love watching it, and I especially love talking to a fellow longtime DOJ alum. You've done a lot to raise awareness about these issues and to explain to everybody why career DOJ employees are some of the best in their fields, and why supporting them is really critical if we're all going to do our part to uphold the rule of law.
Well, thank you for what you're doing and for what your organization is doing. And yeah, we should make a habit of doing this every 4, 6, 8 weeks, and you can update everybody on the status of the efforts of Justice Connection. So thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.